only if you embrace the rest of all at the
Welcome, everybody, to Cross Ice Pass, episode 13. Lucky 13, I like to say. One of the most expensive places on the planet. So, I know the Redwings are going to be back in town around Christmas to play the Devils. So I'm looking forward to that. But I had a really great MSG experience. Coach's Corner. So today, Saturday, December 2nd, today, my kids lost a tough game from one of their rivals. I did get to talk to them about their compete level and the differences in their compete level. I don't think it resonated right away, but by the time we got to the second period, by the time I told them, Pierre Laviolette said one thing when I did my USA hockey training that it really sticks with me, is that hockey is two things. It's time and space. If you can take away someone's time, you're going to have more space. If you can take away someone's space, you're going to have more time. So one thing that was really great today, by the second period, the kids, they lost, by a not a handful of goals, but they lost by a few goals. And the thing that I really loved, though, is that they were able to finally implement this compete level that I've been talking about. And they were also finally able to understand that if you could be playing against the worst hockey player in the world, if you give him time, they're going to find a way to make a good decision. It's the same thing in life. It's the same thing with anything. If you have tons of time to make a decision, you're not going to screw it up. If someone pressures you, there's a good chance that you might screw it up. So by the second and third period, they played really well. They were so afraid of challenging plays, and then they finally realized that, hey, you got to challenge plays. You got your stick. You got to get your stick underneath another stick. It's not about body checking. Some kids think that it's all about the big hit, and it's not. It's about, if I'm skating against an opponent and he wants to beat me, if I hit him hard, that'll be cool. And some dad with a blowhorn's gonna go crazy about it. But in reality, if he gets by you and still gets a scoring chance, it doesn't matter. So, for you guys that play beer league, for you other youth players that are out there, compete is a big important thing. But if you take time away from somebody, it doesn't matter. And also, you can take time away by not demolishing someone into the boards. All you got to do is put a little tap underneath someone's stick, and the puck will be yours. Especially if they're not really strong or hard on the puck. So be smart, be patient, but don't be slow. The other thing today is I have a couple kids that have a tendency to skate away from things because they're so worried about the positional level of the sport. And it doesn't matter. You have to pressure. Pressure is going to do one thing. It's going to take time away. If you skate away from things, thinking that you're in position, you're just going to watch them score on you. That's all that's going to happen. You're going to watch them score on you. I think right there is also the one place that's very similar to basketball. So something to keep in mind for you youth players out there. Something to keep in mind for you beer leaguers that are just starting to get used to the sport and starting to learn it. So I hope that helps everybody. Okay, it's time. Today's guest, I'm pretty overjoyed today. I've had a lot of great guests, but this is my first NHL guy. I met him I found out about him through a close friend. That's of course a Pittsburgh person. Um, Ken Wregget, who was the backup goaltender to Tom Barrasso in Pittsburgh, who won a cup in '92 with them, and also had a pretty outstanding career as an NHLer, and now has a great bar and grill restaurant in Pittsburgh. Does a lot of great things as a retired veteran of the NHL, and has a lot of great stories. So it was so great to talk to him about hockey back in the 80s and 90s. Some of the wild things that he talked about is so great because he really loved it. I think he really loved not only being a teammate, but also being a good player for his teammates. It's kind of a classic, um, nice, nice Canadian story, which is pretty great. So I think we should just get it moving because I could have talked to him for hours and hours and hours. One note, um, Ken's pups jump in at one point. So if you're listening to this off of YouTube, there might be a moment of kind of odd sound, but that's just because his pups were flying around the room unexpectedly, which is not a big deal, but it is what it is. Um, let's move to Ken Wregget. A goalie born in Brandon, Manitoba. Played for Lethbridge Broncos. I always have a hard time saying that. In the WHL, where he won a WHL Top Goaltender Award in 1984. Highest drafted goalie at 45th overall by the Toronto Maple Leafs in 82. Hopped from the NHL to the AHL with the St. Catherine Saints in the first 2 years pro. In 1986, became a fixture in Toronto for 4 seasons. Was sent to the Philadelphia Flyers in '89 to join fellow young goalie star and fellow Brandon, Manitoba native Ron Hextall. Became Stanley Cup champion in '92 thanks to a big trade between the Kings, Flyers, and Pens. Spent 7 years with the Pens. Had a huge year in '94-'95, having the most wins in the league. In '96, was part of one of the longest playoff games in NHL history, and also stopped a double overtime penalty shot against Joe Juno. Later in his career, he spent a year in Calgary with young J.S. Jaguar. Chased another cup chance in 2000 with my Redwings. Spent his last pro year playing at home with Manitoba Moose in the IHL. In 2009, he was inducted into the Manitoba Hockey Hall of Fame with other local greats such as Terry Sawchuk, Ed Belfour, and Ron Hextall. Owner of the 31 Bar and Grill in Bridgeville, Pennsylvania. Great father of 2 that I hear the kids are why that, but that's what brought you to Pittsburgh or kept you there at least. Welcome to Cross Ice Pass, Ken Wregget.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be on your show today.
Wonderful. Well, we always have an interesting start, and I always love to ask everybody, what's your to give me one fondest hockey memory, and it can be a past, present. I have a feeling I know probably what the fondest memory might be, but you let me know, Ken.
Yeah, my fondest memory. I mean, it would probably be hockey memory. It would be. I believe it or not, I had so many memories growing up as a kid. My dad was in the Canadian Air Force, being out in Nova Scotia, Greenwood, Nova Scotia, and played for the Greenwood Bombers. And when I was 10, 12 years old, and I played against like Wendell Young, Al McGinnis back then in some of the tournaments around town. And it was just winning the Maritime Championship, and that the Maritime Championship is the best of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island. And as a kid, that's pretty monumental. And you had to win your province, then go up into the Maritimes and compete in that. And to have that opportunity, and we had really good team, great coaching with Al Pickering and great managing by Wade McPherson that helped us, be able to reach all these milestones. So that was mine when I was a kid, and just that youth hockey is. I enjoyed it with my son. My son's now 30, and I enjoyed him playing hockey, traveling with him, and I know my parents enjoyed it. So I had both sides of the coin, and it was a great experience.
So that's great. So you got to not only be the guy that got schlepped around by your folks, but also you got to do a little of the schlepping yourself with your son. So that's pretty great.
Yeah, what comes around goes around, and I guess that's good and bad. And I'd like to take the good all I can take.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I kind of want to start with, we're gonna do this a little chronological because I know we're gonna talk a lot about your life in Pittsburgh, but I really am kind of curious about what started your hockey life, and did your hockey life start in the net?
Uh, what started my hockey life, I think, probably primarily was growing up in Canada. And like I mentioned, my dad was in the Air Force, and we were up in Cold Lake, Alberta, and that's 3 hours northeast of Edmonton, and that's where it gets 40 below for 2 weeks of the year every year, and you typically in February. And it seems like the light from the lamppost goes straight up. And I remember this girl. I was standing behind her in line waiting for the bus, and she must have had a shower and dried her hair, and we were waiting in this blizzard. And back then there were no snow days. We
Yeah,
never saw pavement for 3 months of the year. You're so far north, and the northern lights were beautiful. And if you were in high school, and you'd bring your date out to the lake and watch the northern lights over the lake, and that was it was awesome. Not many people get the opportunity to do that, but so in other words, had a lot of winter, and hockey kind of was second nature. We played a lot of road hockey, street hockey. The Wayne and Garth and game on, game off, and moving the nets and all that fun stuff, and till all hours of the day. And you'd come in, and you'd stick your feet by the heating duct, and just to get them thawed out again. And let me tell you, when they unthaw, they're pretty much frozen. The net hurts worse than worse than
yeah,
anything. But that's how I started. No, I didn't start as a goalie. I started skating as a forward. It was probably one of those stories. My dad was teaching my brother. He was a year and a half older than me, how to shoot, and teaching him how to shoot, and play hockey in our basement. He had a door on 2x4s for his workbench, and that was the goal net. He used to work down at the rink, and he used to bring goalie equipment home. Back then, we didn't own any equipment. They used to get it from the rink and strap them on me, and be shooting. And there were no plastic pucks back then either. They shooting at me down the basement, and that's how it all started for the goaltender side of things. And that was probably I was probably 6 years old, and I started playing forward and defense, and pretty good player, captain of my team. And I came home one afternoon from an afternoon movie, and we were in Nova Scotia, and it was probably a Bruce Lee movie back in the early '70s. And we went by the rec center, and they had a hockey equipment swap for those are great for every year, whether if you got money or not. It's you don't really wear your equipment out that quick. And I found some old CCM goal skates, and all leather. And went back and told my dad, and I said, I want to be a goalie this year. And I found some skates, and I want to, and he talked to me about it, and he let me do it. And here I was, leading scorer, captain of my team, and then all of a sudden, he's telling everybody, Ken's playing goalie this year. So he got his own hockey team in the organization. In case I didn't make the rep team, and back then that's the best of that league, that division organization would play on a rep team, and they'd travel. And so he took his own team, and I ended up making the rep team. In the following year, I skipped a level and went up and got to play with my brother, so it was kind of nice. So yeah, I've been very fortunate with hockey even as a young kid, and my brother taught me a lot. My dad taught me a lot, and great coaches up along the way with. In junior with John Chapman, Al Pickering, Dave Dill, Wayne McPherson as general manager. It was just wonderful growing up through all those years, and then eventually finally getting drafted into the NHL, and having your dreams come true was something else.
sounds like because your dad was in the Air Force, sounds like you're hopping around a little bit. Because I know you're born in Brandon, then you ended up in Nova Scotia. Um, when was your hope to end up in the WHL when you were getting starting to think about that draft?
No, it wasn't. Things weren't as crystal clear as they are now. Like nowadays you kind of chase hockey, you train for hockey year round. Hockey is year round. Scouting is year round. Back then it was. I wouldn't even say August. I'd say or September, really, maybe a little bit September, but October to March. That was the hockey season. Outside of that, you played baseball, you went swimming, and you did all those other fun things. But it wasn't much for for year round. And hockey found me in Cold Lake, Alberta. And how that happened was my dad moved around a bit. He did his European stint before he had kids, my brother and myself, and he wanted to raise us in Canada, he and my mother and my mom. And so we ended up back home in Canada, I guess. And my dad, I was pretty good. I was putting up pretty good numbers. And there was this one fellow who was a couple years older than me, and he went and played in the Western Hockey League. And at that time, we were living in Alberta, which is north of Montana. And probably if you went from the U.S. Canada border north, I'm going to say it's probably 12, 14 hours. Just kind of a rough guess. Um, and the fellow was drafted in the he played for the Regina Pats in the WHL, which is Western Hockey League. Had I still been in Nova Scotia, it probably would have been the Quebec Major Junior League. And he sent me to, my brother was going away, like I said, he was a year and a half older. He was going to play, we were going to work for the summer. And I kind of didn't want to, sit at home all summer. And I like doing things. So I asked my cousin, they had farms out in Manitoba and Oak Lake, and I went and worked out there for the summer. And part of that was Dad wanted to send me to Doug McCollum's hockey school. Now, Doug McCollum was the coach of the Brandon Wheat Kings, and they had won the Memorial Cup at that point. And it might have been 1980, I believe, right in there. Brad McCrimmon played on that team, which Hextall was from that town. He ended up playing on that team. And I was traded in an off-season trade to Lethbridge because I was scouted by a fellow. That's a great story. I'll get to that one. I was scouted by a fellow in the league I was in playing hockey for the Grand Center Cold Lake Oilers at that point, and that was Junior B. So that's kind of how. So Doug McCollum, I went to his hockey school, and the idea was to get invited to camp or get noticed by a coach. So I got noticed by the coaching staff there, and I went from the hockey camp to rookie camp. And the following year, I made it into rookie camp to main camp type of thing, off season deal with because Ron Hextall was a hometown boy. We were born in the same hospital, and Brandon General, and he was. They had their eyes on him forever, and during that hockey school, I have to mention this one about Ronnie. We were all on the ice. It wasn't a hockey school, I should say. It was that was a rookie camp, and we were on the ice, and then we come off, and then the next shift goes on, and here's this goalie skating around the ice. All the goalies are, stretching or they're, in the net getting shots as the guys are just skating along before the whistle blows and practice starts. And he's shooting a puck around up on the glass. And that was pretty impressive back then. Sticks were, like a quarter-inch thick and they were straight.
Yeah.
A little bit of exaggeration, but they pretty much were. And I remember some kid saying, goes, what's he going to do, play point on the power play? Well, who had the last laugh, right?
Excuse me.
So he ended up getting a goal and everything. So, but anyway, from there I was traded to Lethbridge Broncos, which is in Alberta, which is where I was from. And there was a coach who coached either Wainwright in that Junior B league, and I can't remember the name of the Junior B league, or Vegreville. And Cold Lake Grand Center Oilers were the first year for them. They're sponsored by the Esso Corporation, and the Tar Sands are up in I believe in Fort McMurray. So that was right the beginning of the oil thing up in Canada, or not quite the beginning, but early in that stage, anyways. So we'd travel around playing. And with this one coach for Vegreville Wainwright, his name was Gary Sutter, and if anybody doesn't know, nobody really does. He's the seventh Sutter brother. The other six played junior or played in NHL. And the seventh one, the oldest one, he was coaching. There's hockey right through that whole family, and he got me exposed to Lethbridge, John Chapman. And John Chapman, he drove up, 8 hours or 10 hours to recruit me before I went to Prince Albert to play junior A out there. And that was tier two at the time, and I would have had a scholarship to Michigan State, I believe. But I wanted
That's the right pick. That's the right pick, Ken.
yeah. So, long story short, I didn't get my education. I ended up because I wanted to play in the NHL. At that point, you only have one shot when you're
Yeah.
turning 18, and that was the quickest way. And probably 90% of the NHL at that point was Canadian players. The rest were Americans, and there was communism. There wasn't a whole lot of coming over from Europe, but not like it is now. But so, anyways, that's kind of how we ended up, playing hockey. I know it was a long story, kind of went a little bit on tangent.
No, it's good. It's actually what's interesting. When I was looking at your roster, at your kind of stats, is that there was one year at Lethbridge that you had not only the Sutter boys, you had three of them on your team at one point, and then it looked like there was two other brother pairs. It seemed like it was like the place to go for siblings.
That wasn't calculated like that, I'm sure, but yeah, like I think I played hockey with Brant Sutter, Ronnie Ritchie. That was their top line, Ronnie Ritchie and Troy Loney, and Troy's still here. I'm all good friends with them. Brant was there, Daryl was there, and the Lethbridge Broncos came up through the Red Deer Rustlers. That was a junior B or junior A tier two team. I can't remember which. And it was the Lethbridge Broncos. It was also the Calgary, I think, Broncos or the Calgary Hurricanes and the Swift Current Broncos and all that. So there's the Broncos have a little, they've been around and there's a good tradition that came up through that system, no matter what city they happen to reside in at any point.
Probably tough hockey too. All those farm boys up there. I can only imagine.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. When you talk about major junior up in Canada, like I said, that was so big because people weren't coming over from Europe. I think there was Inge Hammerstrong and Boris Salming really, and the odd Czechoslovakian. I mean, that's how far back that goes.
Yeah.
That would defect, and some of the stories from the guys defecting, like getting shot, jumping the border, and even the stories from the scouts and the threats on their family. I mean, it was hardcore, MI12 or whatever back then.
Right.
It's not like it was, and it makes me wonder too. Like I was the first goalie drafted in 1982, and it had it been opened up to the world, I kind of have a hard time believing I would have been the best goalie in the world because those European goalies, and that's where hockey started, was out in Europe. That they know that game inside and out. The only difference was the North American style with the smaller league, more physical, and the international ice surface, which is Olympic, they call it Olympic as well, and that has the extra footage on it, not lengthwise but widthwise, and that opens the game right up. So skilled players really excel, and the North American, a little smaller, is contained where you can have the goons in there. But the goons, the skill players played their skill. The tough guys, they wrestled amongst themselves, and then it's funny. We had a fella here, Dwayne Rupp, and he played back in the early '70s, late '60s, and he's one of my favorite guys. He's 84 years old, and an old defenseman, tough guy, and he's talking about chicken wire around the nets and stuff, playing hockey, and guys, what they do, and no helmets, and it's amazing
I
how the
can't even
game's changed.
imagine.
Yeah,
I,
crazy.
I can't even imagine those guys just because, when you kind of came into the league, you were drafted in '82 by Toronto of like unbelievable. But also, it seemed like once the '80s kind of started in the NHL, that they were still fighting, but it wasn't how it was in the late '70s for sure. It seemed like they kind of started to settle it down a little bit. But when you like got what I know that nowadays the draft is a big event and everything. How was the draft for you back then? Did they just give you a call and say, "Hey, you got drafted" or something, or what was the difference?
Yeah. The draft is it's a televised production. Where they sell commercials and during the course of the event. Back then, it wasn't. I think I'm guessing that year '82 would have been in Toronto. They usually were Toronto, Montreal, I believe. Uh, and the first rounders, the guys from the Ontario League would go down and sit in the stands and all that stuff. And the guys would be there and never get drafted. And there's some pretty sad stories too. And myself being in Lethbridge, Alberta, that's like a 36-hour drive away. Um, if you have time, I got a great story about that. And
Yeah.
that goes back to the Nova Scotia days. I was in this regarding the draft. I was in Nova Scotia playing as a kid, and here I get attention at school, and I couldn't stop laughing. I don't know why. Kids were. So I get detention. So my the history teacher, he was running detention. It was Donnie Hislop, and he introduced me to all the guys in the detention. Guys, there was a couple of girls there too, most of the guys. And he introduced me as Ken Wregget, the next All-Star goaltender for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's how he introduced me. And I always remembered that. So now the night before the draft, I'm in Lethbridge. Our hockey season's over, and I'm living with my billet family, and we're having dinner that night. And Bruce Redmond and Bernice I was living with, and Bruce says to me at the dinner table, he goes, so all this aside, he goes, what do you think's going to happen tomorrow? Do you think he'll get drafted? Whatever. And I said, yeah, I do. I think I'll get drafted. I think he asked me, you speculated where you're going to get drafted into what round. And he asked me about that. And I said, well, I think I'm going to get drafted in the third round. And he said, third round, why third round? And I said, well, this fellow that from back home, he was a pretty good goalie, and he got drafted in the fifth round. He's played for Regina Pass. And I said, I know I'm a little bit better than he is, and I think I'll get drafted third round. Why I thought that, I don't know, but I did. And he goes, who do you think will draft you? And I said, Toronto. And he said, how come? And I told him the story about detention history class and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he kind of laughed about it. And then, night went on, went to bed, got up in the morning, and now we're having breakfast together. And I was getting ready to go to school, and the draft had already started bright and early. And so the phone rings, and Bernice picks up the phone, and she goes, Ken, it's for you. And they handed me the phone. I kind of looked over, and I go, do you know who it is? And she goes, it's the secretary for your agent. It was Lorna calling. I think her name was Lorna from Renata Sports. And so I went over and took the call, and she said, hi, how you doing? Just let you know you were drafted. And the general manager is going to be calling you in a couple hours or in the middle of the draft, and then the agent will follow up whenever along the way. I said, okay. And she told me the details. So I went and sat down at the breakfast table. So Bruce kind of smirked, and he looks up at me and he goes, so who was that? I go, that was my agent secretary. And he goes, well, did you get drafted? And I said, yeah, I got drafted. And I kind of kept on eating. He kind of laughed at me. He goes, well, what happened? I was drafted in the third round. And he kind of laughed at me. And he looks at me and he goes, I go, yeah, by Toronto. So it was kind of funny whether we manifested something like that, or that was from Donnie way back in the history class. But that was how it kind of went. It was funny. So no, it wasn't like it is now, but it was still exciting. And then you go down to school in Winston Churchill High School in Lethbridge, and get there, and all the guys running. Richie Sutter were there. Troy Loney. I think it was Vern Smith, Grant Couture. I think there's like seven of us that got drafted that year, so we were all sitting there talking about everything. And unfortunately, there's a couple of guys, that are on the team that they didn't get drafted, but they weren't supposed to. But still, it's a pretty nice thing It's an honor. It's an honor. It's an honor.
Pretty amazing that not only you're going to school with those guys, but they didn't give you the day off, for one thing.
No, well,
And then the
I still got done and didn't get my high school diploma until 2 years ago in COVID.
well, it doesn't matter as long as you get it eventually.
Yeah,
But the thing that's great about that is that I can't believe that you kind of guessed that it was going to be the third round in Toronto. Nowadays, people tell you to go play the lottery or something with that kind of luck.
right, yeah. Well, outside the first round, maybe the first, three picks. Yes, yeah. That was like I said. How it'll work out that way is kind of crazy in itself. And I guess if you can ever manifest something, that'd be the way to do it, huh?
Yeah, yeah. No, as far as Toronto goes, I know back then all you had was Toronto and Montreal in Canada, and just getting drafted by that team would have probably been huge. How was your feelings? Just the fact that not only since you already kind of guessed it, but how was it just getting that call from the Toronto front office?
Yeah, that Jerry McNamara was a fellow, the GM that drafted that year. There was speculate. Well, it wasn't speculation. Like the Toronto Maple Leafs did not have a good record. Like they were in the bottom part of the league. So they were really drafting to try to move up. And that draft year, I think, was Russ Courtnall was in there, Gary Lehman. I think we had like five guys. We had five rookies. Alan Best was the other goaltender. We shared duties for the first couple of years, even up and down. Um, so Toronto was probably the hockey mecca of North America. Back then, definitely. I mean, that was the biggest one, English speaking. Outside of that was Montreal. And those are two of my favorite teams growing up. Um, and it's for being Canadian and getting drafted to the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's a huge honor in itself, and it's a lot of nerves went with that, and just to have that opportunity. Then you get in there, and we're not doing very well, and that was very tough on a young kid, especially two rookie goaltenders to try to keep your marbles all in a row there, and
Well, and you guys had by '86 when you were much more full time Maple Leaf, um, you guys had a huge rookie roster. Not only the guys you mentioned, but Wendell Clark and Steve Thomas. Like it was just a full like young roster. And I know that wasn't like today where there's only three. Basically, there was 3 rounds there wasn't 4 rounds of the playoffs. So you kind of get jumped. You're gonna get thrown into the wolves in the playoffs. And I noticed you guys had a couple good first round wins. Probably some upsetting second round 7-game series that happened. But it seemed like in '87, '88, you were the guy there. You were kind of
yeah.
starting to really get into your pro game.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That part of that was maturing, and part of that was we did have a really young roster. And like, how many times you see two young rookie goaltenders straight out of the junior type of thing at that young age? Like, you may have two rookie goaltenders now, but they've been seasoned in the KHL or somewhere along the way that puts with some experience somewhere at a maybe not North American professional level, but a professional level for being out in Europe. Um, and if you look at the guys, we did have a rock star lineup. Stevie Thomas, Wendell Young, Boria was still around at that point. He was playing great too. And I think the first year we made playoffs, it was with 52 points, and we went up against Chicago and we swept them three straight. We weren't even supposed to win. We swept them three straight, and we lost in the seventh game of the. I don't know what that would be called at this point. Conference, not conference,
They
division.
call it the division, I think.
Division. Well, back then it was North Division, Norris Division. Patrick Adams and Smythe, I think it was. But so to get that far was doing really good, and maybe we lack a little bit on the top end nucleus leadership. Not that those guys didn't have leadership, but it would have been it would have been it's like here in Pittsburgh when they won the '91 Stanley Cup. They got Herdina in, they got Mullen in, they got Coffee in, they got Cup winners in, and then they had Mario, they had Recchi, they had the Stevens, they started putting that together. They had Tommy Brasso. I mean, walk into an All Star lineup right there. It's crazy. But
Yeah.
that's it. All depends on the circumstances and what's around you, and it's the little things that make the big difference down the road. It seems.
And it also, I mean, it seemed like it took a few years for that really big, you know, big aha moment for you when you ended up with going to Pittsburgh, because I know you were with the Flyers for a bit, but after the Maple Leafs, and it was you and Ron Hextall were the guys there, but I know the Flyers were having some tough years those years. So talk about, that day, February 19th, 1992. Where was your mind when they started telling you that you're going to go to the Penguins, and so is Tocchet, and so is Jell Samuelson, and I mean, I can't even imagine what that day would be like, going from a team that had seemed like they were at the bottom to a team that was, the recent champ.
Yeah. Philly was another great place. I really can't imagine there's a bad place to play when you're playing a professional level. But Philly with the Snyders there, and Davey Poole and Timmy Kerr and Ron Hextall and those guys, that was a class act place to play there, and people to play with. We're not having the best of seasons, and it was like the panic button was always being pressed. We gotta, and and there was a lot of rumors about getting about trades and stuff like that. Steve Shane was there as well. He was kind of my neighbor where we lived. His name was getting tossed around, and those were really the two. A little bit of Shell, and mine wasn't really wasn't really out there. They were looking at making a change, and the name didn't pop up. But anyways, we played. I think it was in New Jersey that this one night would have probably been the 19th, I guess. And uh, we're coming home, and I was good friends with the bus driver. So I was getting off the bus, and I sat kind of midway to maybe about three quarters of the way back, and so we're getting off the bus right back, and we bus to places under 4 hours in the division, which was New York's, Jersey, Pittsburgh. We flew to in Washington as well. So we took the bus, which was really nice. But anyway, so we get off the bus when we get back, and it's I don't know, 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and Jimmy the bus driver, he goes, Kenny, he goes, I think there's a trade. I heard the coaches talk.
Oh no.
And well, there's been a lot of talk about it. I said, I know that. I said, who'd you hear? And he mentioned Talk and Shell, and he goes, Ken, I just want you. The reason I'm telling you is I kind of heard your name in there too. I just wanted you to be aware if you're. And I said, no, I didn't hear anything about that. It was late back then. It's not like cell phones were like they are now. So you had some respect for not picking up a landline and calling someone at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So yeah, so we went home, dropped the bags off, make sure everything's okay, and then I went down. We had a little pub in our area, and we went down there and talked. Me and Stevie, and he said he called his agent, which was out in Los Angeles at that point, and he said, yeah, he said there's been talking. Yeah, your name was in there. Apparently something's going to happen tomorrow. So anyway, so I went to bed, got up nice and early. Anybody from Philly gets up in the morning and they go to the diners, right? So I got up nice and early, and went to the diner, and I guess I did have a cell phone, and I got a call from my wife, and she goes, your agent wants you to call you, or the GM wants you to call him, or go down there, And she goes, "What do you think it is?" I said, "Well, according to the last night, I'm pretty sure he got traded." I said, "I'm just gonna take my time, finish my breakfast, and I'll mosey on down." So I went down. Sure enough, it was off to Pittsburgh here with Tocchet and Shell and like you mentioned, 3 teams with Los Angeles, and there's all that movement. There's some pretty heavy duty hitters in that trade, going east direction and rights to Yuri Curry and a lot of crazy things. And I always thought I was just a throw in for like a bag of sticks or a bag of pucks or something. And because Pittsburgh had 3 goalies, they just won the cup. They had Tommy, they had Wendell Young, and they had Frankie Pietrangelo. So now I show up in town. Now there's 4 of us sitting. And Frankie wasn't real happy. I don't blame him, and it wasn't my fault. It's part of the game, and he ended up shuffling off to Hartford at that point. And they kept Wendell and myself, and I was considered number 2, and Wendell was number 3. And what a great person he was, because he had the best attitude out of anybody in the locker room. Upbeat, going, kept things to going, moving forward, kept you calm, knew when to get started, and just a super guy. So yeah, that was that was my story coming into an all-star team here in Pittsburgh, being fortunate enough to win the Stanley Cup.
That's pretty good. I can't even imagine not only the fact that you had those at first that many goaltenders there, but how was it walking on the ice to the first practice and having Super Mario flying around and the long haired Yager and all these guys.
Yeah.
Joey
Well,
Mullen too. Jeez, I
yeah,
always forget Joey Mullen was on that team.
yeah. We ended up we Eddie Johnson and EJ and we all lived like a driver each way apart, and we used to travel together. But yeah, it was. I mean, and the list just really does not stop. I mean, you got Yager, you got Urdina, you got Joey Mullen, you have Larry Murphy, and there's only a handful of guys that weren't in that all-star caliber type of thing. I'm just looking outside now. I got snow here.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and when I was traded from Toronto to Pittsburgh, I had mono and I hadn't played for a month, so I had some getting up to speed to do to get going in Philly. Um, and when I got traded to Pittsburgh, I was playing pretty good. I felt good about myself, and I thought, and I remembered that because it was hard as anything. Like, I come from Toronto, so I thought, well, I'm playing pretty good. Well, then this is going to be a lot easier to start off, and then you get up first. You're in the dressing room against, and with all the all stars right there, and it's like you're like intimidated in itself right there. Then you got Mario coming down, shooting on you, and all and now you're after a couple, you keep things pretty tight, and all you get here was boom, boom. That was the puck hitting the back of the net. Boom. It's like, how do you practice against this guy? Like, how do you get it? He's going to destroy my confidence before I even get into my first practice. And he is that good. I mean, and the team was that good. And it's no wonder they won the Stanley Cup the year before. And they weren't really in playoff mode or contention at that point, because I think they were still a couple points back when we got traded there. And I remember saying to my wife, I said, in Philly, there's always a panic button pressed. And I said, I said, it's like guys are like, they're somewhere, they're not worried about anything. And I remember her saying to me, she said, maybe that's the difference between having confidence and not having confidence. I
Yeah.
said, I sure hope so, because she was pregnant with my son at the time, who was born in Philadelphia, and she never did come out because she was pregnant through the whole thing. I got a picture of my son, 4 months old, in the Stanley Cup through the summer, and that was pretty cool. But yeah, to have that experience, and especially as like a you're dropped into that. And what I realized then at that point, because I mean, you know, was I a starting goaltender? Well, I could have started at places, but I could never seem to hold on to that. But I was more so a backup goalie. But I realized if you're in that situation, making a run for a cup or just trying to be successful, that even though you may not be the starter as a backup goalie, what you got to do, And that goes for all the guys that weren't playing every shift, because those guys, Rayo never practiced every practice. He needed to spend his energy during games. The rest of us had to be ready in case something happened. So there was a group of us that went on the ice, and it was like we weren't really doing a lot because it was after the main practice. And so what you realized real quick was that if you're not ready to play and you get thrown into a situation, you're going to embarrass the hell out of yourself. Plus, you're going to piss the whole city off, plus your teammates. And that's not professional. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility in a way that may not be from a starting guy, and there's a responsibility. And there's a, you kind of get in a role. But when you're choppy, you may get thrown, and you may not. You got to be ready. So we used to work as hard as we could and stay on the ice. So if we got that opportunity, then if you look at the stats for that '92 year, you have Mike Needham, Jock Callender, and there was one other guy, the Muskegon line, they called up.
Yeah.
We used to practice, and they end up putting in some key points. Now their job was to get on the ice, give everybody else a break, a 2-minute break, maybe a couple times a period, maybe a couple times a game. But they actually scored some key goals. Now, if you get key goals out of that line, they call it a fourth line, if you will, but you're starting to get productivity out of that, and they're not on for anything. That's a huge step in the good direction right there. So we start to learn. You start to learn a lot more when you get put in these situations for different roles. Because I'd been there, like I said, growing up, but nothing like the Stanley Cup. And I went to Manila Cup in junior. We never won, but there's and that those are all the things you learn along the way playing hockey. And it's fast paced. That was that was 8 years of my 17-year career that we talked about so far.
Yeah, well, and the thing that's interesting about that is it brings up something I was gonna bring up to you, is that there's this new, like, you have like Olmark and Swayman now are hugging after games and things like that, and they're the tandem for goaltenders now has become such a normal asset to teams. Now, what's interesting when I look at your career, you kind of had the same situation with the Flyers and the Penguins. And I mean, you could even say that with the Red Wings a bit as well, that you had a good tandem there.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. If you look at me here in Pittsburgh with Tommy and in Philly with Ronnie, um, I'm not. You'd have to check that, but I may have played more games during the periods that I was there with them because they had injuries. Um, nowadays, the way the game's going, the speed and the level it's played at, you need two guys there because there's concussion rules. There's guys are there's more strain on the joints. There's in the sense that they've been doing this for years and not taking any time off. And mind you, I'm walking around with the game because I got a bad back, but that's more hereditary than it is because of my job or what I did. But nowadays, and looking at Tampa comes to mind, and the Russian goalies there, and they're how well they work together. Back in the earlier days, I mean, the game of hockey was different back in the '80s, early '90s type of thing. It was some of the most exciting guys were getting 200 points. You had the tough guys in there getting 300 penalty minutes. You had, they're just putting in the instigator room. My first game was a bench counting brawl in Toronto against Detroit, and I got thrown off the bench. I remember sitting there, I looked at Riccio, and he looks at me, he goes, "Get out there, kid." And there weighs me over. But the game's different. You need those two guys. You the top line of the minors was almost better than the fourth line at some places, even
Hmm.
third lines, and that doesn't happen anymore. The game has changed. The speed of the game's changed. The demands are different. The injuries are different. It's come along. The goaltending positioning style is a whole lot different. The kids nowadays, they laugh about our big glove saves. We always call it a TV save
It's
for
it's funny
girls.
though, because it's so
Yeah.
funny because there's certain things though that kind of come and go. Like back in the '60s when you had Terry Sawchuk with Johnny Bauer, and you had Terry Sawchuk with Roger Crozier, and then kind of moving through those years. And then I think at one point, I don't know if Jacques Plante played with Kevin oh, at any time, but I know you were in the '90s doing that tandem thing, and then now it's like, Golden Knights last year won with 4 or 5 goaltenders.
Right.
So it's so wild to kind of know that you kind of always have to have your mind on the game. You're always ready. You're always ready, no matter if you're not starting. You got to be ready. So
Yeah.
one thing about that is interesting, since you were helping out Tom Barrasso when the Penguins after that trade, and starting from February through to the playoffs. I kind of want to jump into this Cup Finals against the Hawks, which I don't know if the viewers would know this, but you guys swept them, but 3 out of the 4 games you only won by 1 goal, and out of those 2 teams, out of those 2 rosters, 11 Hall of Famers around that series. Take
Wow.
us through that Game 4 win in Chicago, and like just talk to me about like what happened when you realized that you guys were going to win the game and you were going to get the cup.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy in itself because we went. I'm maybe wrong, but I think the first 2 rounds we almost. I think we were down 3 games to 1 at one point or twice, but I could be wrong on that one. Boston was on a bit of a roll too, and that was the division final for the cup final. And that's when Mario turned Ray Bork inside out. If anybody who loves hockey and they haven't seen that, well, you're missing something out. And here's a guy turning the best defenseman in the league at the time inside out and scoring a goal. It was just amazing, amazing. So that would have been in his 6th season, Mario, 6, something like
Yeah.
that. Maybe, yeah, about that. And then we handled them a heck of a lot better than we thought. Their wheels almost came off because we were just doing that to Ray Bork and things like that. Then we go up against Chicago, and if I'm not mistaken, Chicago was on quite a roll, like 11 games or something.
Yeah.
And and Mike Keenan, like he was pulling everything out of his hat that he could to try to make sense out of the game and to do well, because we started showing them that we could play hockey, and then although they're doing pretty darn good, we were pulling them apart pretty darn good too. And then you had Belfour in, and Hasek ended up at the end, and you had Hasek, Jack, and Kevin Stevens at the blue line. I mean, they were going all out. I can't imagine the dressing room with Mike Keenan, because we all know most of his stories and how he how he can be somewhat not a player's coach, but you got to somewhat bring that out, in the Stanley Cup Finals and keep the guys moving in the right direction. But it was just beautiful hockey by both teams, and obviously I feel that way because we won. The games were tight. You never knew which way they're going to go. And then that last game, you still didn't know. Well, the score was what it was. You really didn't know. I
Yeah.
just remember Tommy putting his hands up and kind of running on the spot when we finally did win the game. But it shows you when you're going for a trophy like that with all the teams and the level of hockey to you never give up. You never accept what may be there. You just keep plugging away and working as hard as you can. It takes a while for it to set in. Even during the course of the game, it may take 2 weeks later. It may take the whole summer later. But it's just the best trophy in the world. I believe by far. Is played by so many different countries, and there's a passion for it, so many different levels, and thank goodness the Americans were finally able to understand it a little better when they had the glowing puck for you guys and all nightmares.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a super game that has a following and a cult following at that, and it's beautiful.
Well, and it's so funny because in the '90s, that was actually that cup win was my first year kind of really watching hockey. I was already kind of getting into it and things like that, but I was kind of paying attention. I mean, the matchup between the Hawks and you guys was unreal. You had two great goaltenders versus each other. You had a young kind of like brash coach versus Scotty Bowman. You had Jeremy Roenick versus Mario Lemieux and Yager. You had all these I think Michael Goulet was on the Hawks too, right?
I think you're
And
right.
and then you had Chelios and you guys had Larry Murphy, and it was just such an amazing
Yeah.
matchup. And then for the fact that the conference finals for both of you were you swept the Bruins, and then the Hawks were just flying up to the Stanley Cup Finals. So it's just unbelievable. And then the thing that's the best, if anyone ever can do a little YouTube search on this, the celebration at Three Rivers Stadium looked like it was a blast.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it had a little bit of rain, and Josh was saying he saw the wet tarp down, and he wanted to. If anybody that knows Trotz, he's a great guy, and he loves everybody having fun. And he went for his little home plate slide on that one. That was pretty cool. But Pittsburgh really is a great sports town. We have the Steelers, which are huge. And then the Pirates with Clemente, and there's been a great sports following, and then hockey in itself. And I got to tell this story if I can. I was at a
Yeah,
golf outing this year, and this fellow come up to me, and he goes, Kenny, he goes, this is the first year I really debated renewing my season tickets for the Penguins. And he said he stopped and thought about it. Now, the fellow was in his like more of his later 60s type of thing, early 70s. And he said he stopped and thought about it. He goes, I've seen the World Series. I've seen Clemente. I've seen 6 Super Bowls. I've seen the Immaculate Reception. I've seen two of the best hockey players in the world, Crosby and Lemieux, for the last 46 years. I've seen 5 Stanley Cups. He said he felt like a prima donna, and he wrote the check, and he's bumped into one of the games already. So, but that's what the Pittsburgh fans here have, and that generation has had it. It's never going to get any better for anybody ever, anywhere ever. And it's we're very fortunate with hockey and our sports per se, and we've even been touted maybe the best football team in the states. Being the Steelers, and if you listen to the real hardcore sports fans from around here, and you listen to how tough it was for the Steelers before they started putting anything together with Mean Joe Green and all the boys back in the early '70s, and what they did to get them guys out here, Franco Harris and Rocky Blair, who's an amazing guy. He's very active in the community as well, and we're sports wise. You got a great city here that you can just fall in love with, and you got all the stories from 3 levels of professional sports.
yeah. And I mean, one good question about that is what really keeps you motivated to be such a great alumni voice in the area? It seems like there's a lot of them, which is great, but what keeps that motivation alive and keeps that love alive for the area?
Well, for me, I retired here and I call it home. I retired from hockey back in 2001. My last team was the Manitoba Moose. I got sent down from Detroit. I left here, went to Calgary, Detroit. Had a bit of a bad back. That was the start of it. Um, and I think for myself, and I live with my fiance, and I've known her for quite a while, and she's a very giving, loving person. And just the people, we do a lot of charity work, and we have a restaurant bar, 31 Spurs Bar and Grill. We're got a nice social media presence, and we work closely with the veterans here, Pittsburgh veterans. We work closely with the Steelers alumni, which is the NFL alumni Pittsburgh chapter, and some baseball. And we're trying to get our alumni together and give back to the community. Like the community's been there, supported us. Nicole and I were on the board for the St. Jude, not the board, but the planning committee for the St. Jude for their gala coming up June 21st, and we just try to give back as much as we can. And I think it's in us, but what really made us realize things was during COVID. Um, being a restaurant, you can be open. That's one of those that people need, emergency places people need, and we can only do takeout. So one of the local doctors that Nicole, his daughter, worked with, Mark Barrett, he set up with Casa, a church, Casa San Jose, and the food bank, and we were making dinner or lunches, during COVID to hand out to the people who lost their jobs for no reason of their own because of what their situations are. They couldn't put a meal on their table, so we're helping them do that. I guess once you do that, you realize, well, that's what it's all about. Is for all of us to help each other. We're lucky we're able to do that. So it's a big part of our lives here.
That's so great to hear, and I know that you've been looking through your career and finding some pretty great videos and interviews that you've been through has been pretty wonderful to see. But there is one thing that always showed up. There's actually two things that show up when I search for Ken Wregget when it comes to videos. The first one is a short one that I find funny because I don't like him either, but is when in the I think it's it was in the playoffs, I think in '86 or something. You were or not '86. It was early '90s or late '80s. You kind of pushed Claude Lemieux over the red line at the Forum, and of course in Detroit we don't really like Claude Lemieux either. So that
Yeah,
was a nice video to see.
yeah. He that was funny. That was we were skating around the end zones, and Hexie was across the ice on me. I remember this, and I always went up and down the red line back and forth, and he was getting a pass out of the corner, and it was a little hot pass. He's having a hard time keeping control of it, and he started going. I don't think it was intentional. With him, it may have been. Who knows? But I was going across, and I saw him come over. So, no, I didn't have time to move, and it was braced for impact. And so I had the big goal pad on. So I just he was coming. We both clipped legs, and he went ass over TKO on that one, and it wasn't intentional. But Ron Hexall was coming the other direction. He goes, "Yeah, Regs, yeah, Regs."
That's yeah.
He was down in the corner or on the side of the boards, all spilled out. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because it was definitely a very Ron Hextall response.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was
with everything that was going on with Brian Propp and all that stuff in the playoffs at that point, with how rough that series was, it was looked at like as appropriate.
well, and then the other thing that shows up when I look you up is this crazy Eastern Conference quarterfinal game 4 against the Caps in '96, which the thing is when I started to research this, the funny thing about the interview they had with you, they said, first I hear you, it said you were taping Mario's stick between the first and second period after you had to take over for Barrasso after the first. Talk us through that. After you were were you Mario's stick taper? Was it like a good luck thing for him?
No. Well, no, I don't think so. But that's one of those things where I said when that's your role, you do everything you can, and that's was my thing. I would help the trainers and run skates back to the room, and especially on the road, they're kind of a little bit short manned. At home, you kind of have more guys, but I used to help them out, and then Savvy would the trainer he would hand me Mario's stick, and he'd say, "Can you skin this?" Take the tape off it, and he would tape it for him because Mario had the bad back. But during the playoffs, he's so busy. So I kind of watched how we did it, and there was a couple things that had to be done, and so I just kind of got good at doing it, and I used to hand it back to Sevy, and I used to say 1 goal, 2 assists, and I was. And I think Mary was listening, and it was almost like good luck, but it was just kind of helping out. I didn't realize Tommy had hurt his back, during that intermission, and I'm just doing my normal thing. And I finished taping the stick, and then it was like, well, crap, I got to go in the net here, make sure I'm ready. Now, had we lost that game, we were down 3-1, which is a tough one to come back for. Now, he said that we had done that a few times in the past, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to make a habit of that. So, anyways, I got put in the start of the second. Tommy came out. I think Patty Lelim was our third goalie there as well. I got the dogs here. I'm sorry.
No worries.
So so when Tommy came out, we started that second period, and Mario got kicked out of the game like I'm not sure 4 minutes into it or 6 minutes into it type of thing. So and their first shot was about 8 minutes into it, and it was the goal. So I think the score was 1-1 at that point. So when they scored, it was 2-1, and then the game kind of went on the third period, and the game was tied at that point. First overtime started, and we started getting our legs, and we had some good young legs, and the second overtime hit, and both teams were starting to play playoff hockey. We're playing solid. Um, that's when that penalty shot happened, and I found out afterwards that was the first penalty shot in overtime history in the NHL. I didn't realize that time. But I got to tell you a story about that penalty shot too. So I always did a little figure eight in my crease, and I pull the snow away. Well, and I was nervous because if the penalty shot went in, Joey Juno, game's over, and we're down 3-1. So as I, doing that little figure eight, I was kind of looking at how heavy the snow was, and it was 5 periods into the game now. So I thought, I'm just going to leave the snow out here. In fact, I even pushed a bit out to bring it in. And I thought, as a goaltender, if you come out, if you come out, cut your angle off, the guy has nothing to shoot at, no net to shoot at. So likelihood is he'll put the puck in firm and try to deke and go around. And I'm hoping the snow will be a bad thing for that happening. Or the other one was stay back. So I decided I'm going to play out. So if you look at the video, you'll see Juno start the puck at the center. He hits the blue line, a little bit inside the blue line. The puck bounces up about 4, 6, 8 inches, probably 6, 4.
Yeah.
Just enough for him to maybe overskate, but he doesn't. But all he could do is kind of shovel it into me, and that's what happened. And just from that little bit of snow and those figure eights, I kind of figured that out. And that's what happened. And then we eventually went on. Peter Nedved scored a goal on Olaf Kolzig. Now during the I think it was the third overtime, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, third overtime, I started cramping up my stick hand. I'd have to put my stick down, glove down the back of the net, pry my hand open, and shake it so I can, my hand would move again. And I'd grab the stick and I'd line up for the face-off. And you're lined up there, and all of a sudden your hand would lock up, and you can't do anything.
No.
You have to play. You can't go off the ice. So you're playing through that, and then eventually went through, and that was an interesting game as well. There's all kinds of stories. Guys are eating pizza and trying to keep the energy up, and it was fun. It ended at like about 2:15 in the morning, and the neat part about that game was um, the bottom bowl. Like it was in Washington. By the time of the second overtime, it started. People were going to work, going home to go to work for the next day in Washington. The Pittsburgh fans, but a lot of them were down on to watch the game, so they all came down to the bottom bowl. So it was almost like a whole game by the last 2 overtime periods.
Wow, that's such a great story because I never even knew of that game, but I heard about the double OT, and then once I started realizing you were involved with it, I was like, holy crap, that is such a great story. And then there was a lot of great interviews after it that they had with you guys, just kind of because I know that the penalty shot that was questionable because they said that the net was pushed off, but it was like way after before the puck got out even there. So, and then knowing that it definitely looked like Joe Juno wanted to go high on you, and he did not. So now we know what the snowplow was
Yeah.
was the problem.
I think he was just trying to get the puck off and not overskate it. Yeah, honestly. Yeah.
So great. Um, and
I'd like to talk to him about that, see what he says, but
yeah,
that's
I
my
think
side.
I think from what I hear, you got to like take a special plane there or a helicopter to get to him in Alaska or
Yeah.
something.
I'd do
Uh,
it too.
yeah, for sure.
I was
Yeah.
from Canada, so
In 2000, we're getting close here. In 2000, I saw you play against the Atlanta Thrashers on December 27th. Of course, you were out, with the Red Wings and you won 3-2. Um, as a kid that loves the Red Wings for myself from Detroit, was there anything distinctly, unique that you remember about your time in Motown?
um
Other than being with Scotty for the
yeah.
second time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the reason when I left here in Pittsburgh. I'm just going to back it up a bit. When I left here in
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh, I was on a no trade contract, and I was 36 going 37. I figured, I knew my years were kind of getting numbered. I'm from Alberta, and that's not far from Lethbridge, so I thought I'd probably retire out there. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to have that opportunity to go out there. So I went out there, and as it turns out, my back wasn't rehabbed properly. I missed half the season. Never signed another contract with them. I was free agent at that point, unsigned. Uh, Kenny Holland with Detroit picked me up for a 2-year deal. Um, and at that point, and that was from Scotty. Scotty wanted someone to back up, to work with, to work alongside Osgood, Chris Osgood, great guy, Chris Osgood, very, very, very good goaltender as well, and very sharp. So I got a chance to work with him. Nick Lidstrom, he was one of my favorite guys. He was amazing, amazing. Top five defenseman in the league. Thomas Holmstrom as well. Like he hung around with Nick, and just two super Swedes, I guess. Scotty was doing his thing as usual. Mark Howe was there. You had some I regret. One of the guys that played for the Red Army. What's his name? Uh,
Larionov
Igor.
or
Yeah,
yep, okay.
he. We used to talk, and we both played chess. And he invited me over. He wanted to invite me over to his house and play chess. And he showed me his like a wine room and had the old antique like. And I never did that. And I wish I would have done that. Because here's one of the old KLM, Red Army guys. I'd love just to pick his brain a little bit. But yeah, that was something in itself because they had won a few cups along the way, and to see what that organization was made of. I think my biggest downfall was the fact that I was drafted by Toronto, and that was so near and dear to my heart, and the rivalry between Detroit and Toronto, and I just had a hard time warming up fully.
Yeah, and
It wasn't a comfort level there when you're from Toronto. I don't think.
it's funny now because some of these like kids I coach and some of the younger guys that I know and that I play with, they have no idea understanding those rivalries between Detroit and Toronto or
Yeah,
Detroit and Chicago.
yeah,
Or I
honestly,
mean, obviously we've still got the Pittsburgh versus Philly situation, but that some of those old original six
yeah,
um rivalries are hard to like let go. That's why I think about this whole Patrick Kane thing, and I'm like, oh, well, Patrick Kane could go back to Chicago. You never
yeah,
know. The Blackhawks versus the Red Wings.
yeah,
So yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, um, I'm happy. Of course, you got to wear the wing wheel, but I know that your heart is mostly wrapped around a Penguin logo.
yeah. Penguins, yeah, this is home. I retired here. Like I said, my dad being in the Air Force, I'm not much for big cities at all. And the people here are really good. You'll see that when you come down that you may have a hard time leaving. It's a wonderful place, and it's been home. And the daughter was born here. Son, like I said, he was 4 months old when we moved here, and very happy with the decision to make this home. And and work within the community and have a business here and meet so many great people while doing all this is second to none.
That's wonderful. Well,
Yeah,
Ken, hey, I gotta say, thank you so much for your time. And I know I could probably talk to you for another 3 or 4 hours longer and just keep pulling these
yeah,
great stories out of you. But I want to make sure that I have enough tape.
yeah. Well, there's always more time down the road, and we'll be seeing you soon up in Meadville,
For
Pennsylvania, a couple
sure.
hours north.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Thanks, Ken, so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. I appreciate being on, and have a great Christmas if I don't talk to you.
Yep, same here.
Thank
Wow, what a great conversation with Ken Wregget. Like I said before, I could have talked to him for hours. Um, this could have been a 6 hour podcast episode. And I can't wait because we'll talk to him again. Actually, in around St. Patrick's Day, I'm gonna head up to Pittsburgh for a really great event, and I'll get to meet him in person. So hopefully, I'll get to see the Redwings beat the Penguins when I'm up there. But it'll be really cool. I mean, his story of him adding snow um, to the crease when Joe Juno in double overtime penalty shot. Come on, some pretty great things with him and Mayor Lemieux. Um, he's got so many other stories. I talked to him off camera, and he's such a gloriously joyful person. So I can't wait to hear from Ken Wregget again, and I can't wait for you guys as the viewers to hear more about him. Today's music that we opened up with is a friend of mine. For some reason, I have a tendency to be connected to drummers. My buddy Eli and his band River Cult. He's a drummer. My colleague and friend Evan with Gooseberry is also a drummer. And then I have Zach Eichenhorn, who is also a drummer, also a fellow Detroiter, also a hockey player from Grosse Pointe. So today's music is provided by me, you, us, them. I'll have a link down below. You can find it there. And I hope that you guys enjoy. They had an album come out in 2022 that's really amazing. It's good. It's good indie rock. Love. It's called Sound Confirms, and I think you guys will all love it. And that's that for today's the Big Lucky 13 episode. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to connect on Spotify, Apple, wherever you can. If you have any input, any ideas, anyone you know that's connected in the hockey world that you think would be great as a person to talk to, shoot them my way. I'd love to hear about it. Because I'm trying to build the cross ice pass. So I hope you're on the wing. Puck's coming to you, and you're ready to shoot it top shutter and get a good goal. So you guys enjoy. I hope you guys enjoyed episode 13, and we'll see you next week.